without the inclusion of any significant parts imported from another state. So if I manufacture all of the parts, but it just so happens that some of those parts are available, the only part we're saying must be manufactured in New Hampshire seems to be the part that's stamped, because as long as the other parts are manufactured, there's no requirement here that says 100% of the parts must be manufactured. Can you address that a little bit?
Well, I guess, I think I follow you. Just bear with me a second. I think the issue would become is once you include parts that have traveled in interstate commerce, you run the risk of losing the protections of the statute. You know, it's not, we do make a point later on in the bill that if it's an accessory and you add it on and the accessory was regulable and not traveling in interstate interstate commerce, it doesn't change the firearm, make the firearm therefore subject to regulation. I don't believe the same would follow for parts. It may be able to be doable in the sense that it wouldn't be detected. You know, it'd be hard to prove those other parts. And as far as whether the guns are going to be exactly the same, whether the firearms are going to be exactly the same or very similar, I suspect they are. You know, I would be, you know, surprised if someone, when people start taking advantage of this, doesn't start manufacturing a 1911 clone. You know, specifically here, it's going to look and operate and function exactly the same, and probably the parts will even be interchangeable. It's just, I don't suspect the same company will be doing it, just because of the law, the issues with the potential loss of the federal firearms license.
Okay, we have two more speakers and a motion clock. Thank you, Mr. Wood. Do you have any written testimony?
I passed out a letter from the president of the New Hampshire Firearms Commission to everybody who's.
Thank you very much. This time I'd like to call Representative Hall, please.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, can I just sneak up and change tapes for just a second?
Sure. Okay. Representative, you have the floor.
Sure. Representative J.R. Hall, Merrimack 13. I am on this bill as a co-sponsor because I believe that we've seen the federal government overstep its bounds in a number of areas. This happens to be a firearm-related bill, but I believe there's some other bills coming forward this session that eventually will deal with other commodities, maybe milk, maybe pharmaceuticals, for instance. The reason that this bill is very much similar to the Montana draft, okay, and I've spoken to on the phone and emailed the original author of that draft a number of times, is there is a great point to make the statement that the states have the jurisdiction and the authority to regulate certain things. It's not to the federal government. That's why the 10th Amendment and the 9th Amendment are there. New Hampshire, in 1792, re-ratified our Constitution. And when they did so, we were aware of the Bill of Rights at that time, okay? And we said, yes, given this particular set of guidelines in the Bill of Rights, we're going to ratify our Constitution. And we are going to retain powers in the state of New Hampshire that are not expressly delegated, okay, to the federal government. Well, now, almost 200 years later, right, in the 30s, for instance, all of a sudden, certain things come up. Well, we're going to regulate this under interstate commerce. Well, and wheat. Well, the farmer grows wheat, okay, uses it for his own animals, okay, and now that's affecting interstate commerce. I think the government has taken what should be, or the original intent of the law of one state forcing tariffs and taxes and other things against other states, and completely gone to the other end of the spectrum. So this bill was drafted. It goes further than Montana. I made no bones about that. Where does it go further? It goes further in talking about regulation and taxation, okay, and then it goes further in terms of penalties. I think Representative Itza spoke well to the penalty section. There are other bills in other states talking about what to do to give teeth to a state's bill, a bill that actually defines and codifies into law, okay, the rights that states have to do what they want to do within their own domain. Just having a bill that says you can do that, great, but without any teeth to that bill, the federal government's still gonna step in. So I think there needs to be teeth to this bill. And then back to regulation and taxation. We spent a lot of time talking about NFA items, so I'm gonna start there, and I will pass out. Oops, didn't divide that very well. This is an ATF Form 4, okay? This is what you have to fill out to apply for an NFA item. And this is an item that was restricted by a 1934 firearm. It's very similar to some other tax forms, but I want you to think mentally about the 1040 that you filled out last year and you fill out this year, okay? On this, there's a requirement for fingerprints. Not sure if any of the 1040s I filled out today require fingerprints, but that seems excessive. There's specific information to the store that sold this item, okay? Down here under Section 5, Section 7 is Transferee's Federal Firearms License Number, okay? This is a number that the BATF has issued to a seller or manufacturer of firearms, okay, such that they can sell an item. Why does it matter which store you paid this tax to? There's a section, second page, Section 17, law enforcement certification, okay? This speaks to a police officer, typically like the chief of police in a town, having to certify that the individual, okay, will not misuse the firearm, okay? And that the receipt of the possession of the device will take place with it is not in violation of state law. If I go further down that same page, okay, change of address, a couple inches from the bottom, right? The applicant needs to notify the federal government if they happen to move. When do we pay a tax and then turn around and have to notify the government that I've moved to a new location? All of these are very onerous, and it becomes clear that this was not intended to tax individuals. This was intended to regulate. And the Second Amendment of the United States Constitution talks about shall not be infringed. Clearly, this is an infringement. And the states have had enough. And it started in Montana. I believe it's 7, 8, 9 states have passed similar legislation at this point. It's introduced in probably 20 plus more. New Hampshire being one of them. A significant number of states in the Midwest, for instance, and in the South have introduced these. And why? Because the firearms, okay, are a specific item that are very traceable, that have serial numbers, unlike corn or wheat, right? I can't tell whether this bag of wheat was made in New Hampshire or not, or grown in New Hampshire. But I can tell this specific machine component was made because if I require that they add your machine into that part, a serial number, okay, and made in New Hampshire, it's a very traceable item. When that particular item leaves New Hampshire, and we put this into this bill, okay, it's then under, it's gone through interstate commerce, it's then under the guise of all the federal and other state regulations. What we're talking about is somebody who wants to set up a machine shop in New Hampshire, a small business, who says, you know what, I have a CAD file for a receiver, and I have a CAD file for a barrel, and I have a CAD file for a frame, and I want to make those parts. And then I'm going to buy some springs and screws and other miscellaneous hardware. I'm going to assemble this, and I'm going to sell it to New Hampshire residents. This is essentially a commerce bill, and that's, ironically, last time it went through Congress, because we have a lot of small shops here in New Hampshire that are manufacturing in nature, who have excess bandwidth, who could be in the business. But you know what? For them to get into the firearms business, it's really tough. And the regulations are very overly burdensome, okay, to get a manufacturing FFL. So this is, I mean, back to my point, this form isn't about tax. This form is clearly about regulation, okay? Photographs, fingerprints, the need to notify the federal government when you move, the need to notify them that you plan to move, to take the journey out of the state. That's not tax. Going further on, sorry, there's a little bit messed up. Someone mentioned earlier that the federal government feels that they have the right. Well, it's great that the federal government feels that they have the right to regulate firearms. But that's not something the states handed over to them through the Constitution. The Constitution clearly outlines their authority and their powers and their jurisdiction, okay? And the rest of that remains New Hampshire's jurisdiction and authority and purview to address. We have numbers of laws in the books regarding firearms. Who can purchase, where they can purchase, what they can do with those firearms, okay? A lot of those are parallel to the federal government, not in all cases, but a lot of them are. And I'm going to use an NFA item to talk about as a great example. The federal government requires that someone who purchases a suppressor pay a $200 tax stamp, okay? So a suppressor is a machined aluminum tube about this long, okay? Has a couple of steel stampings inside or other materials, and then 2 end caps. Costs about $20 to manufacture. They're relatively inexpensive. But because of the onerous burden on this, they sell for between $200 and $600, okay? There is a great business proposition to be made if this bill passes and someone wants to take the chance to go ahead and, like Montana, sue the federal government and say, my state allows me this, why aren't you allowing me this? And by the way, the Montana lawsuit is being funded entirely by private individuals. It is not being paid for by the state. To go ahead and say, I want to produce suppressors, okay? There's no laws regarding use of suppressors. And in fact, those in the firearms community would love to have suppressors. It's great for the bystanders. It's great in terms of indoor shooting. There's a lot of value being able to shoot with a suppressor. But you know what? Right now, you can't buy one without paying the additional $200 tax stamp, waiting 3 to 4 months, okay? And then paying an exorbitant fee because of a limited market. So this is, in a sense, a very pro-free market bill. Next point.
Okay, I'm thinking of, could you kind of summarize Representative Hall's?
Sure, can I just send, so there's been a number of concerns expressed about NFA items, and what I was going to send around is a letter that was sent to eventually Representative Coffey and then back to me in 2009 regarding this bill, okay? And this has to do with the inclusion of NFA items. It's written by the author of the Montana bill, and it talks about, you know what, we should take this forward. We should expand the Montana bill already. And this although the letter's a year old, it talks exactly about what someone complained is the Achilles heel of this bill. It's not really an Achilles heel, okay? There is tax issues and other things that we need to address, and it's time to go forward with that. I think that's it. Is there any other questions?
Any questions for Representative Hall? Representative Krasinski?
Thank you, Chairman.